Hello everybody, good evening everyone. Lots of people are joining with us, so please bear with us while everybody joins. If I can ask you, as you join, just make sure your microphone's muted for me, please. We don't catch any conversation that we maybe shouldn't, or we don't get any feedback.
There we go.
Lots of people joining, that's excellent. I think everybody just make sure you're muted for me. I'll just say that just so that we know we're all there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's almost everybody with us. That's excellent. Okay, so evening everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate it. This is one of our most successful webinars, most heavily subscribed. We've had to keep releasing tickets as the week goes on, as people have been expressing interest. So thank you very much for being here. We are very kindly joined by Jennifer from the Fire Service. I'm going to introduce her and let her give a bit of a spiel about herself in a second. We've had a lot of interest tonight, so I know that people are keen to explore the Fire Service. It's something that people want to know a lot about. I'm also conscious you might have some specific questions, and that's really what we want to give this session over to, is your questions, your issues. So as we go through, Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about entry requirements in general, but what I'd really like is for you to post any questions that you might have into that chat box at the bottom of the screen. I'll be monitoring that as we talk. I'll make sure I'm hidden, you don't want to see me. And we'll make sure that we can deal with those questions as they come up. Apart from that, if anything goes off, Jennifer, are we expecting you to be called out should the alarm go? Oh, you're on mute?
I'm out of hours, so we're fine. I'm good.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody. So like I say, it's really important that you send us your questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. Jennifer, I'm sure, attests to that with what she's been asked, which we've just had a brief chat about. If you do come up with anything, if there's anything that you think this hasn't been covered, we're going to start off by talking about entry requirements in general, broad strokes, and then we'll get straight into questions. So I'll go dark and quiet. Jennifer, if I can ask you to just introduce yourself, a little bit about how you ended up where you are, what it is that you do now, and broad entry requirements for the fire service in general. And then I'll come back and I'll fire some questions at you.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. My name is Jennifer Dent. I am the Watch Commander for DICE in West Midlands Fire Service. What that means, if you're not sure, is diversity, integrity, cohesion and equality. Part of my role involves positive action, and what that means is helping our underrepresented and minority communities join the fire service. And the other part of my role is recruitment. I have been an operational firefighter for 13 years. I have spent a long period of time on the fire engines, and now I'm bringing that experience into a department. I do still ride the fire engines. Everyone that works in an office in West Midlands Fire Service is required to do 22 shifts a year, so I do still keep my hand in. I maintain all my firefighter qualifications to do that, and my officer qualifications, so I do both. But another part of my role are evenings like this to promote the fire service and to maybe break down some of those barriers that people have or misconceptions about a career in the fire service. So, like your host has said, there is no such thing as a silly question. I was once asked if I'd ever attended an incident with a bear. So I don't think we can get any worse than that or any better than that. If there are any questions that you throw me with or I can't answer, I'm sure if I write them down, I'll get back to you or I'll email your host with the answers. But other than that, I'm open to any questions. Like your host has said, there are no silly questions. If it's something you would like to know, I'm pretty sure it's something someone else in the room would like to know as well.
That's fantastic, thank you. We have had a couple, so I'll fire those at you first of all.
Okay.
How old were you when you joined the fire service?
I was 34.
Okay.
There is no age, there is no upper age limit on joining the fire service. If you meet the criteria to join, then you can join at whatever age you would like to join. The average age of the operational firefighters currently in West Midlands Fire Service is 41.
It's all right, they can't hear us.
And you must be 18 years old to apply.
That's great, thank you very much. If I can just remind everybody, just make sure you're muted just so we don't get any interruptions and we don't get any feedback. We've had a really good question from Emily. What's the best way to get into firefighting?
I would say your own personal motivation and interest. There are courses out there that you can do at college. Whilst they give you information and an insight into the fire service, they are not a guaranteed route. You don't automatically progress from those courses into the fire service. So you can do them as a background and as like information, but you would still need to apply and go through the application process, much like anyone else applying to the fire service.
That's great, thank you very much. What are the basic entry requirements to join? What should students and older learners be aware of before they join?
There are several online tests that you must undertake. You complete the application form. That application form checks your address. You must live within the West Midlands Fire Service postcode boundary to apply. You must be 18 years old. And although we don't ask for specific qualifications, the tests that we put candidates through are roughly GCSE grade C level. We do verbal reasoning, mechanical reasoning, and numerical reasoning. These are job-related tests. So, for example, the mechanical reasoning are questions such as time, distance, and travel, or area, or volumes of water, those types of things. The verbal reasoning are you're given a piece of text and you're asked questions about that text. So you need that level of qualification, but that qualification isn't an entry requirement. You would need to have a certain amount of physical fitness, although when you apply, the practical selection tests don't come till about a year after, so you could apply with the base level fitness that you have at the moment and work on it. Look online for what the practical selection tests are. And firefighter fitness is more about CrossFit. It's aerobic capacity, short bursts, and it's upper body strength and grip strength. So you would need to be physically fit, but not just be able to push weights. You must have a level of endurance and upper body strength.
That's great. Thank you very much. How difficult are some of those tests, particularly the fitness? There's quite a few questions coming through about how challenging is that as a test?
The fitness test is broken up into several parts. There is a grip test. You have to hold 25 kilograms for 40 seconds. This is to simulate the carrying of a fireground pump. So that's the grip test. Then you move on to the casualty drag, which is a 55 kilogram dummy that you drag around a 30-meter course. You have a 40-second time limit to do that in. Then there is an equipment assembly test. It is a pump with about 8 or 9 pieces to it. And they are assembled in a certain order, then disassembled in the same order. You have a time limit to do it, and there are pictures to follow. This is testing your ability to follow instruction and look at the pictures, whilst also doing something under a little bit of pressure. The other test is a test of your to see whether you're scared of heights. You go to nearly the top of a 13.5 metre ladder. You do have a working at heights harness on when you do this, and you take what's called a leg lock, where your leg kind of hooks onto the rounds of the ladder, and then you have to let go of the ladder and lean back to demonstrate that you're not frightened of working at heights. Then you climb down the ladder. That must be done confidently. The next test is a confined space test. It is a cage. You wear a breathing apparatus set with a cylinder attached to it and a blacked out face mask. You have to crawl through and negotiate a series of obstacles. And some of those obstacles will get you into a very confined space. So it's to test to make sure that you're not claustrophobic. This test isn't timed, although you do have to complete it confidently. If you arrive at an obstacle and you don't succeed after a couple of minutes to negotiate that obstacle, then you'll be fetched out of the test. The final test, and perhaps the hardest part, is the equipment carry. You have 5 minutes and 47 seconds to complete this. If you Google it, you will find many videos, but I'll describe it briefly. You have to run a fireground hose reel out for 25 metres. You have to carry lengths of hose for 25 metres. There is a piece of fire service equipment that you must carry backwards and forwards. There is a short period where you have to do shuttle runs, and there is a 30 kilogram barbell that you carry as well for different lengths. You are informed as you go along which bit to do, and the instructors will tell you once you've completed one what you should do next. Once you've completed that, that is the end of the practical selection test. At the moment as well, we're doing a verification test. Unfortunately, a lot of our tests are done online, and some individuals think it's acceptable to get someone else to do those tests. So when you attend for the practical selection test, we'll do a verification test to make sure that you are in fact the person that answered the online questions. And that test is not about passing or failing, but about showing the same characteristics as the person that filled in the original test. So if you got a certain type of question wrong the first time round, then you would be expected to get it wrong the second time round, or right. And it will give us a notification of whether the likelihood of who did the first test is the the same as the person who did the second test. I hope that makes sense, but that's the whole practical selection day in a nutshell.
That's fantastic, thank you. How many people typically would attend that assessment day?
At the moment, because of social distancing and the equipment and sanitising and cleansing between each test, we have 6 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon. And we do that over a number of days.
Okay. And can you see a point in future where maybe you go back to pre-COVID sort of levels?
Who knows? Not right now, because the practical selection tests are done at Walsall Fire Station, and we're trying to protect the operational crews. So the more members of public come onto fire service ground, the more risk they're exposed to. So at the moment, it will remain as 6 per session to lessen the risk of another outbreak on station, because an outbreak on station is devastating. It wipes out a whole crew for a number of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. A few more questions about sort of minimum requirements. Is there a minimum height or particular set of GCSE subjects that you would look for?
We don't look for GCSE subjects. What the tests will demonstrate, they're set at GCSE grade C level, but we don't ask for those qualifications. So you don't need to have them. It's just to get you prepared. Like if you go onto BBC Bitesize and look at GCSE maths, that will be the kind of level of question that we'll be asking people online.
Okay, that's great. Any minimum height requirement as well, sorry?
No, not at all. You can be any size or shape. As long as you can pass the tests, you fit the criteria for those tests, then you can apply to the fire service. You can be 4 foot nothing or 7 foot and anything in between.
Great, thank you very much. How long does it take from sort of application to first day? How long can applicants expect the process to take?
Pre-COVID, it was taking as little as 6 months. During COVID, it's taking on average a year to a year and a half. The reason for that is that, again, because of hygiene, social distancing, we can only take so many people at training school in one time. So the current level is 16 people per training course, and they're split into 2 groups of 8 so that they can work and train without getting too close to everyone. That has massively slowed down our recruitment process. So at the moment, I would expect a minimum of around 12 months.
That's great. Thank you very much. Just to reassure everybody, there's some really good questions coming through, but there is also a lot of questions. We will get through them. I'm just going to try and put it in some sort of logical order so that we cover everybody. But what I will also do is you will get a copy of this recording. So everything that we discuss, you'll receive copies of. And then if there is any follow-up after the event, we can always try and respond to those separately. There's a lot of questions coming through about the number of vacancies, whether it's better to apply when you're a little bit older and there's a bit more life experience, or whether you're looking for sort of fresh out of college, 17, 18. Lots of questions around at what point should people be applying, older, younger, and what sort of experience are you looking for?
What I would say to that is do your research into the role of a firefighter. There's no requirements for life experience or job experience, but the job will expose you to dangerous environments where people maybe have mental health issues, maybe have come to a point in their life where they're living in dangerous circumstances. You will attend dangerous jobs, you will have upsetting jobs, and it's whether you feel in yourself that you have the resilience and the confidence to deal with those things. If you have the resilience and confidence at 18, then by all means. But if you feel, oh, I don't think I could cope with that right now, I think I need to go away and get a little more experience of life and the world, then it's really down to your personal qualities and attributes. When we do the behavioural assessment, we'll ask you for examples. If you go online, there are the personal qualities that a firefighter should have. They're things like commitment to development, commitment to excellence, commitment to diversity and integrity. If you Google them, you'll find them. And if you think that you've got all of those qualities, then you can apply, and it doesn't really matter what age you are.
That's great. Thank you very much. So for those of you that are asking, it's definitely, if you feel you have those qualities at 18, then yes, by all means, stick an application in. How many do you tend to recruit? What sort of recruitment levels? I meet a lot of young people interested, but there's always concern about, if I don't get in, is there anything else I should do? You know, do I look at sort of on-call roles and that kind of thing? So can you tell us a little bit about level recruitment, please?
At the moment, the West Midlands has a workforce of approximately 1,200 operational firefighters. Every year, through retirement and natural wastage and people leaving, we lose approximately 80 firefighters a year at the moment. There are 5 training courses a year with 16 on each. So that gives you an idea of roughly how many we recruit. Mm-hmm. There is a caveat to that though. Some candidates, for many, many reasons, get back coursed onto the following course. So there's not always 16 places available. For example, if you didn't achieve in your trauma part of the course, and you achieved a certain level that you could retake the course, then you would be put onto the course subsequently following that. If you sustain an injury at training school, then you would be given a chance to heal and sent to occupational health and given the support that you need, but then you would be put on the following course. To give you an idea where we're at currently, there are roughly 4 or 5 firefighters that get put from the course they're on onto the following course. So we're looking at approximately 12 places per course for new entrants.
That's great, thank you. Do these courses carry a cost to the applicant?
No, there's no financial cost, and you are paid a trainee firefighter's wage from the day that you start.
That's excellent. That's good news for everybody. I can see there's a lot of questions there about that. That's brilliant. One more about entry requirements, and then we'll get on to the role itself and what to expect. Are there any health conditions or disabilities that will exclude an applicant?
They're all taken on an individual basis. What you would need to do is look at the role of a firefighter, and for example, we can make adjustments for conditions like dyslexia. The Disability Act states that we can make a 10% reasonable adjustment for these for conditions. And there are firefighters out there that have disabilities, who sustained on-duty injuries, who continue to function. So each case is taken on an individual basis. You must be able to complete at least 90% of the role. And I can't be any more specific than that, because it depends on the disability and what it is and how it affects you in the role.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
So, for example, if you have lost a couple of fingers, as long as you can carry a ladder and perform the role, then we would make reasonable adjustment for that. you know, in tailored gloves, for example.
That's great. Thank you very much. You've mentioned training courses. If an applicant doesn't necessarily pass a training course, can they reapply, or do they have to wait a certain period of time? How does that work?
Up until the point where you're offered a contract of employment, if you fail at any point up to that point, then you have to reapply from the beginning. You have to wait 12 months and reapply from the beginning.
Mhm.
And once you start training school, you have to be successful at the majority of it to be back coursed onto another course. So, for example, it can only be one subject, for example. If you're failing every single subject, then while you're a trainee, you're still under, you still have to fulfill the training requirements. The training school staff do make every effort to try and get every person through. But that's a two-way process. If it physically can't be done, then unfortunately, we have to let people go. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's great. Thank you very much. Sorry, my 7-year-old had got a question to ask us away to the way. There's quite a few questions that have come through about how many people apply for those places on the courses and how many get in. How competitive is it?
For every one person that gets to training school, from application stage, it's 1 in 1,000.
Crikey. That puts that into some sort of perspective, doesn't it? Wow. Okay.
It's roughly one in about 800 to 1,000 get through the whole thing and end up becoming an operational firefighter on station. I
think that's a standout stat from tonight, if nothing else. Wow. Okay. Lots of response to that as well. Somebody's asked about if somebody has ADHD, is that something that would disqualify them in terms of health conditions?
If it's a neurological or it depends on your learning capacity. When you go to training school, you must be able to take in a large volume of technical information and practical information, and they are long, hard days. So 4 or 5 hours worth of technical information. We do make reasonable adjustments for things like dyslexia, like every trainee gets a laptop, and if adjustments need to be made to that, you are given extra time for assessments if you need it. But there is a minimum amount of information that you must be able to take in while you're at training school, and it's an 8-week course. You must be able to take in hose, pumps and ladders. There's a trauma course that lasts for 5 days that has a lot of theory and a lot of writing in it and a lot of tests. So I suppose it depends on how much that condition affects you and how much adjustment you need and whether you can take that volume of information in that short period of time.
It sounds like quite an intense training program as well, training process.
It's the hardest 8 weeks of your career. By far. It is very hard, but it is very rewarding and it is very worth it.
And is that a national programme? I know you're specifically West Midlands, but would we expect that no matter where you're applying to?
Different fire services have different training schools. The basic elements that they teach you will appear in everybody's training school. So you will all be taught how to operate a pump. You'll all be taught how to put water through a hose. You'll all be taught how to use a ladder. You'll all be taught breathing apparatus, trauma, RTC, which is road traffic collisions, how to use that equipment. There'll be an element of the community work that we do. So all of that will be in training school. How much or how little each brigade does depends on the individual brigade. Like, for example, some of the Shire brigades have a 16-week course. Ours is 8 weeks. So the length and the length of each section is down to each individual brigade.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Just a little more. The 1 in 1,000 that there's been a lot of response to, is that around how many people apply or how many people pass through training school?
How many people apply? So from initial application to getting to training school. So from going online and expressing an interest and then getting the next test. So from that point onwards to actually getting to training school is 1 in 1,000, roughly.
Crikey. And is that how applicants should start, by expressing their interest through the website?
If you go to wmfs.net, there is a link on there that will take you to the first application stage. The first stage will give you a couple of screening questions to make sure you're aware of the role of a firefighter and how much is involved. So do your research, make sure you understand what the role is and what we do, what sort of jobs we go to, basically what you're getting yourself into, the shift pattern that we work. Sometimes it's unsociable, sometimes it's over Christmas, sometimes it's over Easter. You know, and there are times when you'll be away from your family for a long period of time. So you have to take all of that into consideration and then put yourself forward for application. That's
great. And could you repeat that website for me, please?
wmfs.net.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
And if you go to the careers page, it gives you a brief explanation of what you're applying for, and then there's a link on there that takes you to the application stage.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the sort of role itself. But before we do, I just want to make sure that we've picked up on everything that everybody's wanting to know there. So there's lots of questions about applying at 18. It certainly sounds like you can do that if you feel you've got the experience and certainly the emotional capacity to manage the role. Lots of questions about how long does it take? I think we've probably gone through that. In terms of what can you offer, what makes you a stronger applicant, I assume if people check the criteria on the website and have a look at what's required and sort of try and give examples of that, try and look at how they can develop those skills before they apply, that might be the most useful kind of way forward with that.
My advice for that would be prepare yourself fully for each stage that you're going into. If you Google these things, there are plenty of websites out there that can support you with the PQAs. If you Google firefighter PQAs, there are a number of sites that explain what they are and what sort of things we're looking for at interview. Make sure that you know you're aware of what the practical selection is and prepare yourself physically for that. When you go into the behavioural assessment, make sure that you understand what you're coming into, and anything that you need to address prior to that, like grip strength or upper body strength or aerobic capacity, make sure you've prepared for that, because there's nothing worse than getting to that stage and then failing and then having to wait 12 months to reapply.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I want to move on to the role itself. We've had a lot of queries about this. Lots of people are saying, can you give us an idea of sort of your longest shift, your worst experience? So we've had lots of questions about those, as you might imagine. But also, apart from sort of shift length and your worst experience for a firefighter, what's the most frequent call out and what other roles are available within the fire service? I'm sorry, that's a lot to bombard you with, Jennifer, sorry.
I'll go with the first one, the shift system. We have what's called the core shift, and they work 4 on, 4 off. The first 2 days of those 4 shifts are 8 o'clock till 6 o'clock. So 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. And that's on day 1 and day 2. On day 3, you work a night shift, which starts at 6 p.m. and goes through till 8 a.m. the following morning. On day 4, you do the same again. You start at 6 p.m. and go through to 8 a.m. the following morning. There are 4 core shifts, red, white, green and blue, and they work at 24 hours between them. So you'll start at 8 and finish at 6, and then the following shift will start at 6 and finish at 8. So we have a 24-hour system built up of 4 shifts. There is also what's called the late shift. They do 4 days on and 4 days off as well, but they work 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night for 4 days, and then they have 4 days off. So those are the late shifts. When you join training school, you could be posted to either, and also to any station within the West Midlands boundary. So it's wherever the vacancies are at the time that you finish training school.
That's great. Thank you very much.
What's the next question? Sorry.
A little bit about personal experience. So what's the most frequent call out for the West Midlands Fire Service?
Most frequent. We have a high incidence of road traffic collisions. We have a lot of false alarms, where a building alarm has gone off stating on the panel that there's a fire and there isn't. We have, unfortunately, house fires. You know, no one wants to go to those, because if someone's having a house fire, they're having a really bad day. They're very varied. I've been to each shift that you do will bring you a different job. And every job that you go to, even every RTC will be different to the next one. There's no standard road traffic collision. Some of them might be as minor as a small bump, and some might include, you know, saving someone's life, cutting them out of the car to save their life. And it might involve different vehicles. So it might be a standard road car, it might be a HGV, it might be a bus. There are so many different vehicles out there. Even every house fire is different. You could go to a house fire started in a kitchen, or started in a bedroom, or started in a flat, or started outside in the garden and spread to the house, or started in the loft and spread down. So every house fire is different, every RTC is different. The worst jobs, there isn't one that stands out particularly, but the worst jobs are when someone loses their life. That's never pleasant. They always stand out as the ones that you wished you hadn't gone to. The road traffic collisions where someone's passed away, or the house fires where someone's tragically passed away. So those are the worst ones. Or if it's the middle of winter and it's freezing cold and you're at a massive factory fire and you're there for hours on end and you're cold and you're tired and you're hungry and you've got another 4 hours of your shift left, they're not particularly pleasant either.
Okay, thank you very much. What percentage of your time would you say is spent out on call? I mean, I know in some respects that's how long's a piece of string sort of question, but is there in a typical shift, would you expect to be out most of the time?
Depends on the station that you go to. Some of the inner city stations are very busy, and you'll spend up to half of your shift out on calls, maybe even all of the shift. It's very random because we're only called out. We can't predict what we're going to get called to. It's only people's emergencies that we get called to, and you can't predict an emergency, unfortunately. So some stations, you might do a tour of 4 days where you're out every day. You might do another tour of 4 days where you're not out at all, and you will do station-based activities. So you could spend early on in your career, if you go to a busy city centre station, you may spend a lot of your time attending incidents. If you go to one of our more rural or on the boundaries of our the West Midlands, they're slightly quieter in terms of the volume of incidents that they attend. So it depends on where you go. It depends on the time of year as well and the weather. Like historically, in the snow, we'll have more incidents. In the summer, we may have a peak in incidents with garden fires and barbecues. Certain areas, the more deprived areas of the city may, unfortunately, deprivation follows with fire incidents. So people whose life has turned in a direction that they didn't expect, and they fire safety in their house isn't maybe what it should be, may end up in more house fires. So it really does depend on where you are, the time of the year, and which station you go to.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. There's quite a few questions about going back to some extent to the entry requirements. So I just want to post a couple of questions to you and we'll see where we go from there.
Okay.
Lots of students are saying with the application process, is that the only way in, or can they access it having come maybe as an ex-forces or fire service within the forces? Is that an entry point?
No, it's a standard process for everybody.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. How many are in West Midlands Fire Service? How many sort of serving officers do you have?
Operational.
Yeah.
Roughly, frontline staff about 1,200. Wow,
crikey. Okay, wow, that surprised me. I don't know why it surprised me, but it surprised me nonetheless. A couple of questions about when you're on a shift and you're not on a call out. Is your time sort of assigned? Are you given training roles? Is there a lot of admin?
There are core functions of a firefighter. There's breathing apparatus, RTC, trauma, hazmats, working at heights, water rescues, pumps and ladders. All of those have to be maintained on a periodic basis. So every year you will be assessed on all of those skills. Running up to that period, you do training for those. So you do the training and then you do the assessment. So that's one part of your life other than being called out. The other part is station routines. So, for example, pieces of equipment need periodic testing. They might need taking apart and putting back together again, or they might need testing, or they might need running, or you might be just a visual inspection. So all of the pieces of equipment on the fire engine may get tested or cleaned or, whatever's required periodically. Mm-hmm. You've also got protection work to do. Part of our role is fire safety, which means that you're looking at businesses and factories from a point of view of you want to be prepared when you turn up to that business for an incident there. So a lot of it is inspecting premises to make sure that you're fully aware as a service when you turn up what you would do, where the nearest hydrants are, what the hazards are in that building, where you can park a fire engine, for example. Have they got any hazardous practices that we need to be aware of? We also do, not at the moment, but we part of the Fire and Rescue Services Act is that we have an educational role for children in schools. So when we get back to any kind of normal, we're doing it online at the moment, but the schools at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 3 have input from the fire service. There is our community work as well, where we do safe and wells, which means that we will go into people's building, like into their home, invited, and we will give them fire safety advice that's particular to the home environment. So, for example, your smoke alarms and how to test them, electrical safety, not using extensions, for example, how to heat your, dry your clothes safely, so tumble dryers, cooking safely. So a large part of your day may not be incidents, but there's a lot of training, a lot of community work, a lot of education work, a lot of prevention work involved in all of that.
Great, thank you very much. A couple of questions about having spent time in the Army Reserves. Is that an advantage when applying if you've done something like the Army Reserves or the Territorial, something like that?
Yes and no. There's no benefit as in we give people from the Army any advantage in the recruitment process. It may help you in the fact that you're more physically prepared or mentally prepared, but there's no, the selection tests are designed to be fair to everybody and give a level playing field to everybody. So there's no one group of people that gets an advantage over another in the application process.
That's great. Thank you very much. You've mentioned there about how big the area is, West Midlands. What if you complete the training successfully, but then you're moving? Do you have to redo any of that training when moving to a different service?
It's particular to the service. Some brigades will accept transferees without any retraining, but it's particular to that individual brigade and what their requirements are. Some of them will require you to go through a whole training school. Some of them don't accept transferees. They will expect you to apply right from the start like everyone else does. Mm-hmm. So you need to look at the fire service that you're at and what their policy is on transfers.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. We're getting towards the end now. I'm conscious we're coming up to an hour and you've kindly given your time for this. I did want to ask if you can, this might be a bit too personal, but
no, not at all.
Can you give us an example of a call out that you've been on that really sort of stuck with you?
I think your first fatal incident always stays with you. It was not long after I started on station, and you're in training school, you're given like the bare bones of what you need, but you must spend a period of time on station becoming a competent firefighter. So from finishing training school to becoming competent will take you roughly 2 to 3 years. And in that period of time, you can still be called out to every type of incident because you're given the safety critical skills and information that you need. And the rest of it is built up through on-the-job experience and training to build you up to that complete firefighter. So I got turned out to what we thought was just a car versus lamppost, which means that a car has crashed into a lamppost. When we got there, the two occupants of the car, one of them had managed to release himself from the vehicle and walked away, but the other one, the car had turned onto its side and skidded down the road. But the driver's window was open. So the driver then lost everything from here upwards on the road. So that one always stays with me because it was particularly gruesome. And it taught me a little bit about myself, how I react in those situations, and also how we as a fire service are not only there to rescue people, but maintain someone's dignity and help the family through such a traumatic period, because quite often the family will be invited to the roadside to hear the news. I remember it particularly because the sister of the driver was heavily pregnant at the time, and she asked me if her sister was still alive. Now, in these circumstances, the decision to declare death and pronounce someone dead and release that information to the family lies, in this instance, with the responsibility of the police. So you have to find it within yourself, your rapport building, your tact, your diplomacy to direct that person to the police and not give them that information. But I remember when they did tell her, it was the most ear-piercing shriek I've ever heard in my life. And I was about 40, 50 metres away from her. And that kind of incident will stick with you. You know, but you don't want those experiences, because every bad incident that you go to is someone else's worst nightmare, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I certainly think that's driven home some of the competencies that are required as well. How do you stay calm and go home at the end of a shift, having gone through that?
I'm a very reflective person. You have to be very self-aware, aware of your own emotions, aware of your own mental health. Reflect on what you've seen, reflect on what you've learned from it. Realise that this is part of your role, being confident and resilient, but also realising that if you really do need help and that incident has affected you adversely, that you... And all of this support is out there, that you must get that help, that you manage your own mental health. I like to think of it as like you as a person as a bucket, and everything in your life, your home, your job, the way you are, the things that you do, all drip into that bucket. And as a firefighter, you might have a few extra drips, but it's that one drip that makes the bucket overflow that you have to be aware of. So being a firefighter is about being self-aware, self-confident, self-resilient, but also reaching out if you really do need help and not being embarrassed or ashamed of that at all.
That's great, thank you. I particularly like the bucket reference for a firefighter.
Well, it may be an insignificant job, but it might be the one that tips you over, like mentally and physically. So you must be very aware of yourself, aware of, your behaviour. If you're drinking more heavily, for example, or you're not sleeping very well, you must be aware of those things.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Now we're coming to the end. Thank you everybody for taking part. Thank you particularly to Jennifer. Really appreciate your time. I know you're not on call, you're not out. Really appreciate it. We're going to finish on a lighter note. There have been a couple of quite funny questions, some in particular about driving the fire engine. So tell us a bit about what that's like and whether that took a lot of extra training. How different is it?
The driving the fire engine, if you want to do that, having a driving license isn't a requirement to join the fire service, but you must be aware that you must present yourself at work for 8 o'clock on a morning if you're on a call shift. So you've got to take into account how you're going to get there, whether you go by bike or bus or whatever. So you don't have to drive, but you have to make your way to work and from work. If you want to drive the fire engines, obviously you've got to have a car licence to start with. And West Midlands will provide you with an LGV. So you go through a standard LGV course, like the ones that you have out in the real world to drive a large goods vehicle. Once you've done that, you will spend a period of time driving the fire engine and gaining experience. you have to get 350 day miles and 50 night miles, because driving at night is very different to driving in the day. Once you've done that, they will put you through a blue light course and an EFAD. So it takes roughly 2 weeks to do an LGV, and then you go away and drive the fire engine under non-blue light conditions for a period of time until you've got more experience, and then you do your blue light course. As regards to what it's like, it's a proud moment, I would say, because you're very much the focus of attention when you're the driver, because you're right at the front. It's a very demanding role, driving, because when those bells go down, you must get your crew in a timely fashion from the fire station to that incident safely and effectively, but also bringing in all your blue light skills, making sure that you don't cause any accidents, but you get there as fast as you can, especially if it's a house fire person's or a road traffic collision person's reported. So yeah, there's a lot to being a driver. If you're going to undertake this role, my recommendation would be concentrate on becoming a competent firefighter in the first 2 or 3 years, and then take on the role of a driver, because the driver will not only drives the vehicle, but then becomes the person who's responsible for the water on the fire ground, or supporting the incident commander, or sending messages to fire control, or, you know, a whole lot of coordinating goes into being a driver.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. There's lots of really positive comments. Just again, really echo that. Thank you very much for this. This has been incredibly useful. It's a level of insight that we rarely get, I think, certainly from my perspective as a careers advisor. There's so much there. I need to go away and watch it and listen again, I think. Thank you very much to everybody for attending. You've got a few contact details for me on screen there. So if there is anything that you want to ask, if there's any follow-up, please do come back and let me know. My email's on there as well. Just to reiterate, a recording will come out once I've edited it. So hopefully by the end of the week. And if you do have any questions, come back and let me know. We've had a few questions just to finish, Jennifer. Is there any sort of apprenticeship route into the fire service, or is it applying and training through the courses you've mentioned?
No, it's just applying and going through training school and then becoming competent on station.
Great, that's great.
Other services may accept apprentices or have different routes. So if that's the route that you would like to go, have a look at different services. I'm not saying what the West Midlands do, everybody does. So, you know, some services do offer routes in through being retained, for example, or apprenticeships or colleges, but just not in the West Midlands.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's it for now, everybody. Jennifer, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you very much for coming along. And hopefully we can try and do this again another time, I think, based on the success. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.